Welcome to another episode of Life After AI. I believe this is episode 8. We're going to talk a little bit about a recent development called AutoGPT and going to discuss like the autonomous agents that are starting to form. We're going to talk about a kind of simulation that was done that shows that we might be in a simulation. And we're about an Elon interview with Tucker, among maybe some other topics. So yeah, you want to lead us in to AutoGPT?
Yeah. We can kick it off with these autonomous agents. We kind of had like a lull period in AI, and I say that lightly because it was like maybe 2 weeks or so that like nothing major happened, and then on that third week, AutoGPT or just autonomous AI agents in general kind of took the internet by storm again. So, to give some background on what exactly these things are, they're basically AutoGPT is like this program that is basically designed where you give it a specific task and it will run recursively in a loop to basically take that task, think about what it needs to do to accomplish that task, and break it into a bunch of different sub steps, and then go through these sub steps one by one in order to actually accomplish the steps. Uh, and basically, it's like a autonomous agent in general is designed um, like at the top to basically break this down, and then it will spawn, I guess, smaller or like sub agents that are basically like, so for each task, it'll have a sub agent that is designed to operate on that task. Um, and what I find this like super profound, I guess, like, I don't know if you remember, but like a couple episodes ago, we kind of talked about like prerequisites for AGI, and I said like the two main things that I think would need to happen for us to get really close to AGI would be like, one, it has the ability to like reflect on itself and continuously improve, which AutoGPT kind of checks that box. And then two would be some form of like long-term memory, which right now ChatGPT doesn't really have that. It's basically just limited to whatever your current conversation is, and then after that, it's kind of done. Um, but there's already been some implications added for AutoGPT that allow it to basically store everything that it ever comes across into some sort of database, and that kind of serves as like it's long-term memory or whatever. But I think there's a lot of like really interesting implications that would come of this. I guess we can kind of dive into some, but like, what were your initial thoughts when seeing something like this?
Just that we now seem a whole heck of a lot closer to AGI. Um, Before it was like, okay, yeah, like 10, 20, however many years, but now it's like, is this thing coming out like later this year?
Right.
I don't know. It just seems like a huge advancement. It was just something I hadn't even really like conceptualized, I guess,
Mhm.
up to this point. So yeah, pretty shocking. One thing you said it could like a prerequisite for AGI was improving upon itself, and you said that Auto GPT can do that. Is that what you meant, or was it like, did you mean it can just like solve problems on its own? I think those are two different things.
Right. It can as of now, it can just solve problems on its own. I wouldn't say it can, like, I wouldn't broadly say it can improve itself. I think
What
there's a
if
whole
you
lot that needs to happen. Sorry, go
what
ahead.
if you prompt it to improve itself? Is that improving itself? You
Right.
get the question.
No, I do. Like, theoretically, you could make it aware of all of the code that it was built on, and then give it the ability to write its own code and then like iterate on itself. Theoretically, yes, that's I guess possible. Um, but I think like the issue with that right now is still the context window for prompts is pretty limited. But still, like, you couldn't just copy and paste in like 100,000 lines of code and say like, go through all of this code and do whatever. Is the prompt window is just not big enough for that yet. Um, but we'll get to that point. Like with GPT-4, they have the new upgraded context window size, which I don't think is publicly available yet still. But when that happens, you're going to see a lot more interesting things, I guess, come from that because then, I think the context window, the new one is like 32,000 tokens, which is basically like 50 pages worth of text. I don't quite know how many words that is or how many lines of code that is, but I mean, 50 pages of text, that's quite a bit. So that's like you could write a pretty substantial program within 50 pages of text and then give it the ability to go through all of its code and like recursively improve itself. Um, so we're definitely getting there. A lot of cool things too that have come from it is basically like giving it the ability to browse the internet. That was kind of another, I guess, prerequisite for AGI that you could throw in, just having the ability to freely go on the internet and navigate where it needs to go and learn what it needs to learn. Um, that's already coming from these autonomous agents. So yeah, people are already like just building up different tools that you can integrate with them to give them the ability to do whatever needs to be done.
Yeah. Um, I think, I mean, obviously before like the amount of building that was going to be done with this technology was going to be insane. But yeah, with this AutoGPT, I think it's just going to go through the roof, and then it's going to go through like the next roof. And um, I don't know. I think what I'm excited about this idea of building personally, like before I've been interested in AI just because it's interesting, but now I kind of have spawned my own idea, and now it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. Like now I
Mhm.
understand the hype about AI, and so it's exciting. But like from my perspective, I don't know shit about building stuff on the internet. And
Mhm.
so there's already a lot to learn. And then, I mean, I just feel like it's going to be like, I'll catch up. Another whole thing to learn about and whatever. Kind of a
Right.
tangent,
But
but
I kind of think like as AI gets more and more advanced, there's actually less that you would need to learn because it can just do it for you, Like
yeah,
in the application of like building a business or really any kind of like software, I guess, um, there's gonna come a time where you can just spawn up a couple different AI agents, give them their own tasks, and then just press start and let them go do their thing. And then however long it takes, if they come back with, either a fully built web app that is designed exactly how you want it to and that functions perfectly, or maybe it's draft up a research report over this specific market and come up with advertising strategies for me. I mean, literally, you can eventually you could have it do pretty much anything that you want it to, and you don't have to do all that research yourself. So like the barrier of entry for businesses is just going to dramatically go down, and not more, I guess more broadly speaking, just like the people often in AI, they refer to like the cost of intelligence. Like what does it require to like learn all these new things? It's basically going to zero because you're going to have this AI friend or component or whatever that you can use to have it tell you anything you need to know, do anything that you need to do. Um, so it'll be pretty interesting to see what comes from this.
yeah, yeah. It's crazy to think about just because for like all of humanity, humanity's history, the concept of building is typically really hard. It's the idea is that destroying something is easy, uh, building something is hard, but now it's like building might be just as easy, which is
Right.
mind blowing, I guess. Mhm.
And I think another thing too, I mean, I think it's good to talk about both positives and negatives that could come about from this, but there's inevitably going to be autonomous agents that are spun up to cause harm. Um, like it's going to happen. Whether it's hack into whatever and cause as much destruction as you can. Like there's so many things that could come from this. I mean, like I saw some example on Twitter the other day, like someone giving not that it actually did this, but just someone was posing an example, but like um hacking into like some sort of airport mainframe and just like causing absolute mayhem with flights or something. I mean, there's so many bad things that can come from this, and I would be inclined to say that like our current tech infrastructure won't be able to like what's going to go faster, the rate of improvement of AI, or like how fast can we drastically improve security on the internet? Because I would argue that AI is going to move way faster, and like what can we do to stop that? Like I don't know.
Uh, So, okay. So, uh, I don't know if we talked about it last time, but I read an article by Tyler Cohen, and he talked about this idea of like, you know, the comfort and stability we've experienced, generally speaking, within like the last 60 years here in the US. Um, it's kind of like he said, it's isolated us from history in the sense that for forever until this time period, like humans have just dealt with like inherent danger in life. And it's just been, there hasn't been that security blanket that maybe we feel today. I know I certainly feel it. Like, it's like when you go to a movie and you watch good guys fight bad guys. And damn, that's crazy. Like, I couldn't even, that's exciting. And it's also nothing like the world I live in. It's,
Yeah.
I think that's where we're going. I'm not arguing we should go there. I think, I
You
think
mean
we're
back to
just
the
inevitably going.
chaos and danger?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, I'm not arguing we should go there. I just think it's inevitably where we have to go. And while it's scary, I think it's just like, that's how it works. That's more how life traditionally has been. And
Mm.
also, this could be, I mean, it's also kind of exciting in a way. I mean, it's not if something bad happens to me, but it's just,
Mhm.
we're just going into this like era of adventure and tragedy and whatever. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, I
It's
get
going
that.
to be interesting for sure.
100%. But I think like on the flip side, I could see some sort of like battle of AIs basically. Like you have the AIs that are created to cause harm and create destruction, and then you have AIs that are created to like specifically to prevent that stuff from happening.
Yeah.
Um, what that kind of war looks like, I have no idea. Maybe it just goes on in the background and we don't even think about it. But um, I do think just the as the pace as the pace of innovation increases, there's going to be like the spectrum of like good and bad outcomes is just going to grow on each end. Like there's going to be a lot of really good things that come from it, but there's also probably going to be a lot of bad that comes from it.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm still in the camp of like the good is going to definitely outweigh the bad, but I just think we're definitely in for some chaos over the next several years or decades even.
Yeah. And, you know, um, so it was the All In podcast episode. I don't know what number, but they talked about, should we regulate, should we not regulate AI? And, um, but, there was certainly one good argument for why we should regulate it, but I just think the cost of regulation, which we talked about before, is that it's not a guarantee the rest of the world is going to regulate their AI. And so we regulate ours and we become susceptible to be destroyed and or whatever else by theirs. And so either way, it's chaos. So we might as well take the path of where we have a fighting chance.
Yeah, I agree. And I think while I do think there needs to be at least some level of regulation, I don't know what that looks like, and I'm not confident in our government's ability to do that in like an effective way. I mean, if there's anything that we've seen what happens from regulation, or at least I won't say this as a blanket statement, but more often than not, regulation just like drastically slows the advancement of whatever it may be. Um, and in the case of AI, that is like a very dangerous game to play. Like I don't, especially when you have other countries involved, like you mentioned, that like I think we need to stay ahead of the game at all costs because there's way more harm that could come from other countries being ahead of us that might not have the same values that we do. And so, yeah, I still think there should be some level of regulation, but I remember in that All In podcast they kind of talked about it too. Like you can't sell like we have the FDA for a very specific reason. Like you can't sell food or create drugs and just put them out there for anyone to use. You have to go through this regulatory process to get it approved before you can do that. Um, Same for if you want to build rockets and shoot them up into space. Like you have, I think the FAA or something. Like you can't just do that. So they're kind of posing the argument you shouldn't be able to just put AI out there for anyone and everyone to use without having to go through some specific steps beforehand. Um, and like broadly speaking, I agree with that, but I don't know if that's a feasible task to do.
Yeah, because um, it was mentioned like that process becomes susceptible to political bias, and just those who are politically connected are gonna be able to push their products through, and those who aren't, well, they'll be stuck in mud. Another idea
Yeah.
that they talked about was self-regulation, and when they talked about it on All In, it was in the context of like, those developing their own products, like have their own like safety uh, safety teams, and they'll do their best to regulate their own products. And but I think you can look at that as in another context as well. Like you're seeing self-regulation within the market as a whole already with Elon's announcement of TruthGPT. So you have OpenAI and ChatGPT, set on this side with its values or values, I guess, and then you're gonna have TruthGPT over here with its values, and I mean those are gonna be inherently different objects, and but I think going down this path kind of sets it up where maybe they'll, like we said, kind of like fight it out on their own. That's a weird concept, but yeah, and maybe that's not that path.
Yeah. And maybe it might just have to come down to just like putting a little bit of faith in humanity to just not go too far with this, like I'm not sure. I I think like it's safe to say that humans are pretty bad at like predicting exponential improvement, like and that like it's impossible to know what's going to come from like an S curve of improvement like that. Um
Mhm.
and so how do you make some sort of regulatory body that knows the exact values of what needs to be done and what doesn't? I don't think that's like a feasible thing. And so we might just have to. I mean, I think at least the people that are leading the helm of building AI right now, they have like very good intentions in mind. They're fully aware of the dangers and they're doing what they can to, make sure they're building something very safe. But there's always going to be the bad actors. So I think maybe as long as we have the good actors ahead of everyone else, that should set us up for having the best chances of success with this because then, let's say OpenAI or even Elon, for the sake of example, like they are the ones that come to creating an AGI first, whatever that may look like, then we can kind of utilize that AGI to kind of play defense on all the other bad actors that are creating programs to cause harm or do whatever. So
For sure. Speaking of Elon, you mentioned you brought up some valid concerns that are applicable to today's world in that Tucker
mhm.
interview.
Yeah. So I think a lot of like the AI danger talk has kind of gotten lost on this whole scenario of like just humanity ending, basically. Um, and while that is a threat to like some extent, there's probably way more pressing issues that we could be talking about now that are more feasible within the near term. And that's kind of what Elon was doing on this Tucker Carlson interview. Um, he thinks that within the very near term, whatever that may be, it could be, the next several months or maybe a year or two, that what's a pretty realistic scenario of happening is basically AI being used to just manipulate public opinion. So maybe it's maybe it's foreign governments, maybe it's our own government, who knows? But the option is there for these entities to basically utilize AI, ingest a ton of different data on the internet from social media or whatever, and basically train their own models that are designed to just sway public opinion in whichever way they want. So maybe it's to um, have a certain election outcome, maybe it's to get whatever it may be, who knows? But I mean, we've already kind of seen our government do this with all of the stuff that Twitter has put out over the past several months with the Twitter files. Like, this is not something that they are morally against. They actively have done this and probably still do to some extent. So we shouldn't put it past them to also, and I'm not just speaking for US, like this probably be the case globally, but like scenario is very real of them creating AIs to uh, put information out there that's specifically designed to just sway public opinion or human opinion in whichever way they want to. Um, do you kind of see that being like a realistic threat?
Yeah, definitely. But um, so he was proposing that's why we need to slow down AI.
He didn't specifically say in this interview that that's why we need to slow down. He just said he's been saying for the past decade that we need to be extremely cautious and do some sort of regulation in order to help prevent this. Um,
Yeah, my initial reaction is like that's just a problem to respond to. Um, I just don't know how you counter it.
yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess the main thing would just be human verification is going to be more and more important. Um, Especially as, I mean, our world is extremely digital now, and it's just going to become increasingly more digital, the amount of time that we spend online. And so being able to verify that whoever's writing that tweet or sending you that text, whatever, that they are 100% a human being, that's going to be like crazy vital.
Yeah.
Um,
And so like, do you want to talk about? I'm aware of some of them, but I mean, you know a little bit about what Twitter's doing to kind of help that along. I mean, I know like you gotta pay the $8 now and whatever else. But is there more?
there's stuff they're doing on the back end to just like security wise to prevent bots from signing up, just making it harder. Basically just like increasing the barrier of entry for someone to spin up a bunch of bots and um, get them posting stuff on Twitter. But also, yeah, the verification with like having to pay $8 a month and verify your identity and stuff like that. I think it will just kind of become inevitable that regardless of whether you're paying or not, but any kind of social media platform, you're in order to use it and engage with it properly, you're just going to have to submit your identification. Like, I don't really see any other way around that in the future. Maybe it's not your ID. Maybe we come up with some new form of like digital online passport that verifies your identity. I don't know, but I
Mm,
just kind of see that being
mm.
inevitable.
I guess so. That kind of brings it to the debate, which I haven't seen in a while, at least on Twitter. But at one point, I know like Jordan Peterson and maybe a couple other people were arguing pretty strongly about whether you should be allowed to be remain anonymous on Twitter or not. And I guess I have two. I mean, I just see both sides. Like I know, like in one of my English classes, we're kind of doing this like public rhetoric thing, and it's interesting to say the least. But they're putting out all this information, and they're just kind of hiding behind the USI logo, like keeping their identities protected. Um, I just don't know how. I don't think that's good. Like in this context, you're putting out some information and whatever you should. I just think there's something about standing by what you say. Like, um, but then on the other hand, obviously there are certain circumstances where if you have a certain opinion and you say it, then you're screwed. So, and it's nice to have that in it anonymity. So,
Right. I agree with that, but I personally find it more dangerous to where we've kind of become accustomed to being able to say whatever we want to say and not have to face the repercussions of those statements because you're doing it behind some false identity on the internet, you know? Uh,
I think, yeah, I think my final conclusion on it at the time, well, not final, but my conclusion on it at the time was like, I understand the value of being anonymous, but I think we're at a point in society where like, it's kind of the time to stand up and like say what you mean,
mhm.
and have your name by it because we're, yeah. But anyway,
Yeah. No, I agree. And I do see there's some values that can come from not having to, you know, put your full identity out there on the internet, but with just the way AI is heading and the dangers that could come from, you know, having certain social platforms controlled majority by like just a bunch of bots, a bunch of people that you don't know or whether they're real or not. Um, yeah, there's a lot that could happen with that. And two, like with everything that's happening as far as like this digital content creation with AI, like it's not hard for people to make deep fake videos now. We have the AI technology to basically create any kind of voice that you want. Like it's literally just going to become increasingly more difficult over time to know, even if you're on a FaceTime, like you aren't, it could still be hard to know if that person's actually real or not, you know?
mhm.
Um,
This is a perfect place to throw in that Drake song.
oh, right. Yeah. Um, so over I guess it was last week or something, this anonymous, producer, I think he goes by Ghostwriter or something, put out, a song by or that sounds exactly like The Weeknd and Drake. Um, if you had just sent me that song and said like Drake just dropped this new song, and I listened to it, like I would not know the difference. There's no way to know. It sounds exactly like Drake. The Weeknd voice is also like very very similar. Um, and yeah, it kind of just it took Twitter by storm, and I think now like how what does this mean for artists? You know, like if you can use a voice, like if you can just like sing a song very poorly, just like a normal person with no skills whatsoever, you just sing that song and then like dub the voice with whatever artist you want, and then have AI like clean up all the music and vocals and stuff for you. Like, what does this mean for for artists? You know?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I wonder what Drake's reaction was to it was. I wonder if he was
Right.
like, "Oh, that's sick," or like, "Shit, I'm screwed."
Yeah. And the same could be said for movies or TV shows. I mean, they kind of talked about this on the All In podcast too. But man, it's just crazy to think that you're never like we will reach a time where you're never gonna know if what you're watching or listening to was actually made by people or all AI, and maybe we won't even care. Like it just might become the new norm, you know?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, too. I mean, I wonder if I mean, there's probably like forms of entertainment we haven't conceptualized yet.
Hmm.
So give it like a week, it'll probably show up. But yeah.
Right.
So I know they were talking on again on All In. God, that seriously, that was a. I don't know if you can tell by the amount of times we've mentioned it in this episode, but that was a fantastic guest. So
Mhm.
I wonder what episode it was. I guess it doesn't matter. Just
It was like 200 or something, but for anyone watching, if you haven't seen the All In podcast, like definitely check it out.
yeah. But yeah, they talked about how like, a writer could create a story, and then just within that story, like each consumer of it could kind of have their own individual experience within that world and with those characters.
Mhm.
And that sounds freaking sweet.
Yeah, I think the same is likely inevitable for, I mean, not just music, but also movies, TV shows, video games. Like I
Mhm.
really like this concept of just like like an infinite video game. Like it's designed around some broad story or environment or whatever, and then based on all the actions you take within the game, like the story changes and adapts, and theoretically it just kind of goes on forever, you know? Like right now, the games that we play or the movies that we watch, they're condensed to however whatever the time frame it might be. Eventually that we can just play games that last forever, and like they just generate themselves as you move along. And I actually find that like super fascinating. I think that'd be pretty incredible.
Yeah, that'd be sweet.
And it might be the same for music too. Like maybe this whole concept that we have right now of like we have our favorite artists and they like are, I guess, manually making their music. I mean, there's a lot to be said for the artistry behind that, but realistically, like 30, 40 years from now, we might not care about that anymore. We just want to listen to whatever we enjoy the most, and we don't care if it's who is by, whether computer generated it or not. Like maybe we just have the like Spotify is just like completely ran by autonomous agents that just like create music on the fly based on whatever your listening preferences are, you know?
Yeah, it's gonna be weird. It's gonna be weird to see like what happens to the value of human created stuff.
Mm.
Um, it's just hard to even. It's honestly just hard to even think about.
Yeah, for sure. One thing too that I wanted to go back on before we move on to the other topics was kind of going back to like the AI agents and stuff. Um, this paper was posted where this research lab created like 25 different AI agents and gave them each their own individual like character traits and motivations and also their own like individual memory, and then put them all into a simulated town. So just like a very basic like pixel game basically, and then just observed them and saw, you know, what they did, what their interactions were like with each other, how their conversations went. Um, that freaked me out. I'm not gonna lie, because I've always found like the simulation theory very interesting, and a lot of people like will kind of dismiss it and just be like, why would anyone like want to make a simulation, and just like watch what people do? Like, are we like humans are pretty boring? Like, why would we ever do that? And like, we're already at the stage of AI where we're making simulations. So, I mean,
Mhm.
granted, they're very like rudimentary where they're at right now, but I mean, give it another 20, 30 years and like we could be making simulations that are just as complex as like what we current like our current reality, you know?
That hearing about that kind of made me realize like how similar life is to, uh, I guess, yeah, like a computer program or something. Um,
Hmm.
for sure. Yeah, the one thing that I thought of was like, you know how like a computer can get a virus. Uh, well, like it's like civilizations can get viruses, whatever it may be. But you know, you can have a civilization like running just fine, and then yeah, just for like some reason it goes crazy, or like a person, or uh, yeah. But yeah, life definitely seems like it could be a simulation.
Right. Um, yeah, and we'll all the stuff that we're referencing, we should probably like put in the description of this video so everyone kind of take a look at it if they want to. But yeah, that seeing that just kind of that really freaked me out. I mean, they like ended up having like they ended up throwing like a Valentine's Day party together and like just unprompted, like just did. And then they kind of like reviewed all of the actions and kind of rated them. And they said that the actions were rated more human than just normal humans, like role playing. Um, take that how you want to. I don't know
Yeah,
how
what does that?
exactly they would have.
What does
I don't
that
know how they would have like. Yeah, I don't know how they would have like scored that exactly. But yeah, the whole paper has a. I haven't dove into all of it, but it has a lot of interesting stuff. Or just about the interactions that they had with each other and like how like what emotions that they felt. And granted, they're simulated emotions, but still like we're getting we're definitely at the era of AI where things are just getting like really weird.
Yeah. So, um, something I've been thinking about is like, how we seem to be naturally really incentivized to build. Like, there's something about it
Mhm.
that just is like crack when you're doing it. That kind of plays into the simulation theory. Like, okay, we're going down the rabbit hole. So
No.
let's say, let's say somebody like created us. Okay. Well, obviously, okay, there's like two reasons they would have created us. A, for their own entertainment, which that would be kind of messed up in my opinion. They could have made the world a whole lot less chaotic. Two, they're trying to like figure something out, trying to like have us solve
Mhm.
a problem. And that's where the building comes in. The natural incentives for building comes in. Cause like, yeah, those are my two theories for what here.
So it's like it's our programmed motivation, basically, to just advance humanity.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just the
Yeah,
idea that we
really.
can't really like sit still. We're always
Right.
either, uh, we're always just generally getting better. That's really weird.
Yeah.
No other
Just kind
animal
of
really does that.
yeah. Yeah, you're right. It's just kind of innate in us, I guess, to do that. Um, Man, we can't go too far down the simulation rabbit hole on this. Maybe for another episode, but yeah, I kind of find that whole area like really interesting, and I'd like to. It'll be cool to see like what comes about of like as AI gets more advanced and we can like we're getting to the point where we can create these really advanced video games too that are like getting to the point where they're almost like the environments are like very close to reality. We could eventually put in like the time will come where we could simulate something like extremely similar to Earth, for example. Um, and yeah, I get too far down that for now. What oh, you had a topic that you wanted to talk about. The taxation for AI labor.
Yeah. So again, Tyler Cohen, he put out an article today, just talking, um, how we should or could go about taxing AI labor. Um, let's see here. The concept, as you kind of mentioned when you first saw it, is weird. Uh, and it would also be, as Tyler points out, hard to figure out who to tax because agents can make agents. And I guess his concern seems to be that, it'd be hard to track the AI labor back to the human labor. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So to be fair, I haven't really read it all that much. But again, and I don't know if we mentioned this in the episode, if it was before the episode, but it's just kind of this idea that like AI seems to be progressing faster than what the government can comprehend.
Hmm.
Um, whether we're talking about regulation or with taxes. And I mean, have you seen, yeah, have you seen any government remarks on AI at all?
I mean, I've seen like the most that I've seen. I think like from the Biden Twitter account, he just put out some vague statement saying like AI can do a lot of good for humanity, but there could also be lots of dangers that come from it. We need proper oversight or something like that. And like, yeah, but like, as, there was no like actions coming from that, you know. So no, I haven't seen anything like of legitimacy where they're actually saying like, okay, like actually exploring ideas of what could be done. Maybe there's some out there, I don't know, but I haven't seen anything like actually solid, you know.
Yeah. And so there's two areas where feel AI is I feel AI is going to affect, but it hasn't like got there yet. And that's education and politics. And in regards to education, like I'm just getting to this point where it's like I think much like music, much like AutoGPT, like it's going to be this thing that we haven't even like school is going to look like this thing we haven't even conceptualized yet.
Mhm.
And I think that's going to be the same thing in terms of politics. What that, yeah, I mean, obviously, like I don't know what that's going to look like, um, but it's weird to me that nobody's freaking out about this. Who's a politician? Because I mean, maybe this is a jump, but like I think it has the potential to like shake the whole foundation, everything we know. That's a very dramatic statement, but I just I don't think it's
I mean, no, I
necessarily
agree with
wrong.
that.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Uh, I've seen a lot of big names in the AI space kind of thinking like AI will likely be more profound than like our discovery of fire or something, you know? Like think about everything that stemmed from that. Like this like one thing kind of comes to mind, like we kind of talked about this off the pod, but like I don't really see any outcomes where there's things that we actually are going to have to do and work for, like way down the line, you know? Like what are we gonna have to do as humans when all of our basic necessities are taken care of because of AI? Um, like is there still going to be some sort of incentive to build companies to do work, to make money? Like I don't I can't really conceptualize why there would be, you know? Like so this is really far down the line, obviously.
So to me, like that kind of brings in an interesting economic question. So a lot of turmoil throughout history has been caused by the poor wanting what the rich have and the rich wanting to keep the poor from getting what they have. Like if we're all
Mhm.
just guaranteed, uh, yeah, if we're all just guaranteed whatever we want, maybe that allows everybody to cool off. But then what happens when we get bored? What, well, yeah, which is, yeah, what happens
Mhm.
then?
Yeah, I don't know. There will definitely be something. I don't know what. Like if everyone's just suddenly on this level playing field where everyone has, you know, housing, they don't have to worry about that. They don't have to worry about food. They don't have to worry about transportation. As humans, we still want nice things. At least a majority of humans. Like we still want the bigger house. We still want the nicer car. We still want
It's
the
the
fancier food.
it's the hierarchy. So, you know, if you listen to Jordan Peterson, he'll talk about how archaic, how long hierarchies have been a part of human history. We share it with going back with to our ancestors, the lobsters, lobsters. Like humans have been organized within hierarchies for millions of years, and it's just
Mm.
part of us. Some of us have to be higher than others, and so on and so forth. So as that economic hierarchy maybe disappears, that's just going to be like super weird. And I think what will happen first is like, obviously, it's probably not going to be this like peaceful transition. I mean, I think we're going to really start to see those as the implications of AI become clearer and clearer. Like the way I just thought of AI yesterday, like blew my mind. And I just saw all these possibilities. And I think that's going to like slowly happen to each and every one of us. And as more and more of the elite or whoever start to have that, I think you're going to start to, I would guess, start to see some power plays from them and whatnot. Um,
Mm.
so I mean, it's I don't know. It's kind of what I talked about earlier. Like I think things are going to get spicy. This definitely there's bad stuff that's going to happen, but for some reason, at this moment, I'm excited about it. Not the bad stuff, but it's just going to be an
Right.
adventure, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to just think about like really stretch far into the future and try and think about what this might look like because I do kind of agree with that statement of like AI being the most profound thing that humanity will ever come up with. Uh, like I don't know what comes after that. what comes after AGI? Like nothing. Like anything that comes beyond that isn't going to come from human innovation. It's coming from the beings that are now way more intelligent, and more efficient than us. So, I mean, that's kind of that quote that we have like on our Twitter banner for the podcast. It's like, AI is the last invention that humanity will ever need to make, or something like that.
Hmm.
Um, I tend to agree with that, but yeah, I don't know. I get literally my mood on AI changes like several times per day. Like I'll have these certain thoughts. I'm like, wow, this is so exciting. And then I have other thoughts like the next hour that it's like, wait, there's so many things that could go wrong with this. And this could be really bad. And then like the next day I'm back to the positive side. So I mean, what I find the most interesting is I still feel like there's people, like the vast majority of people do not even like this is not even a thought in their head. Like they don't really see any of this stuff happening. Like, yeah, people have heard of ChatGPT. Some people use it, but a lot of people that I speak with that aren't like super involved and just like keeping up with tech or whatever, they're just like, what am I going to use ChatGPT for? Like,
Hmm.
they aren't worried about their jobs. They aren't worried about what the future is going to look like with AI.
I had that.
So I'm kind of curious, like, what?
I had that realization a little bit yesterday. I was so I caddy in the summer at a golf course, and there was just a big work group that came out, and it seemed like a lot of them were kind of mid level managers or whatnot. And I don't know what they do, and I don't know if it's at risk. I would assume it's at risk from AI, but I don't know if it's of immediate concern or not. But yeah, I was just like sitting there wondering. I was like, are you guys like freaking out about this? Do you even know what's going on? Um, I, for some reason, personally, as like a person who's going to become a teacher, like I feel a little bit protected from all this. But even I'm like looking like, all right, how can I kind of get ahead or figure out my own little path here? But if I was in business and not a creator of some sort, like I'd be like, all right, what can I do to A, I'd be freaking out. B, I'd be working my ass off to figure out something that gives me value.
Yeah, no, 100%. Because I'm more on like the entrepreneurial side, I guess. And when I remember very distinctly like seeing ChatGPT and what its capabilities were. It's like anything that I was like working on at the time, or like any sort of like business aspirations that I thought I might want to go down, they all just kind of vanished instantly. And I'm like, this is where I need to be working. Like this is where I want to be involved in, you know? Um, but yeah, it just still just blows my mind that like a lot of majority of people are just completely oblivious to what's happening or what's about to happen. Um, and I don't. That's not a good thing. Like I don't think it's not good for this kind of technology to just sneak up on you and be like, because then at that point, like you're so far behind, you know? Um,
Yeah, and at the rate things are going, it's going to take a lot of effort to stay up on this stuff. But I mean, as you mentioned, theoretically, also the more it innovates, the easier it'll be. So weird stuff.
right. Yeah. No kidding.
That's why I
Were there
felt
any
like,
other?
well, just as a personal note, like going into this podcast, I felt just there's just so many things to keep up with, and uh, it's nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. But it's definitely very like overwhelming. But I mean, that's kind of like the reason we wanted to do this podcast to begin with was just, you know, it kind of forces us to some extent to keep up with everything that's going on. And like, it's also just like really fun to talk about and like pose a bunch of different ideas and outcomes of what could come from this. Uh, so yeah, were there any other topics that you had? Should we just wrap up here?
Mm, I'll look real quick, but I don't think so. I saw like a startup from Together. It says this tweet from Pete non Mayor Pete. I'm assuming he's big followers. Well, anyway, he announced some LLM
Mhm.
I don't know. It looks a little janky. That could be the worst take in the world if this thing takes off, but of it at this moment it seems janky. So I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know if it's worth
No,
thinking
I'll
about.
I'll have to I'll have to keep up with that because there's really, like there's been some models that have come out over the past, like, couple months or so, but nothing that even comes close to, like, GPT-4 or anything like that.
Yeah.
We still have nothing coming from Apple AI-wise. I mean, hopefully something they start getting on the ball here soon.
Mhm.
I mean, Facebook has been putting out some stuff. They have their own LLM that they put out, but it's like pretty gated, which I thought was interesting. Like it's technically open source, but you have to be an approved researcher or something to actually get access to it and use it. So it's
So it's the
not
same thing
really
as OpenAI.
basically, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's funny.
And but yeah, I guess we'll wrap it up there and then we'll be back next week with whatever the latest news is.